This is Feminist Wellness, and I'm your host, nurse practitioner, functional medicine expert, and life coach, Victoria Albina. I'll show you how to get unstuck, drop the anxiety, perfectionism, and codependency so you can live from your beautiful heart. Welcome, my love. Let's get started. Hello, my love. I hope this finds you doing so well. This week, I am beyond delighted to share one of my favorite episodes with you once more, which is episode 88, all about false positivity. This has been coming up so often anchored on Instagram and in my life. This push that so many of us feel, particularly from our codependent thought habits, our perfectionism, our people pleasing, to make it look like everything is totally fine. I'm fine. Everything's okay. I'm great. When you're like actually kind of drowning or when things actually feel really challenging. And I'm particularly thinking of this as we come to the 2-year mark of COVID, enter our 3rd year of COVID. I'm like, are y'all okay? Right? And as Florida and Texas are passing these horrifying and ridiculous, homophobic, transphobic, just disgusting bills are on the table. Like, how you doing? Are we okay? Are you okay? What's going on? Right? Like, how are you supporting yourself? How are you showing up for yourself? How are you showing up for the people you love? And when we pretend everything's fine, everything's okay, I'm totally okay, it's okay, we don't give ourselves the space to feel our feelings, to process them somatically through our bodies so we can move to the other side of that anxiety, that stress, that disappointment, that overwhelm, the place where we can take action, right? Or we can take action to engage in social connection with the people we love, and so we can engage in activism, so we can let our feelings fuel righteous action to make change, to support vulnerable communities, to be caring and kind and of service in the world. And to get to there, we need to process our feelings. We need to show up for what's real. Because just wishing your feelings would go away, sugarcoating them in positive vibes only, that does legit nothing other than keep you exhausted and keep you chasing your own tail, trying to push those feelings down and down and down and buffer against what is actually real and what you're actually feeling. And so I wanted to reshare this episode because, it's a good one. And the point is so incredibly useful. The lesson about acceptance, about being with what is, being real with what is, stepping into vulnerability and letting your friends and lovers and the people in your world see you in your suffering, in your realness, so that maybe they can show up if they're available, right? They can show up for and with you to hold space, to support you, to connect, to have mutuality, reciprocity, love, connection. And those are beautiful things. And they're things that become available when we are real about just how much things might suck in this moment. And when we say, I'd really like it if we could hold hands right now. Metaphorically or actually, right? I'd really like it if you could have my back right now. I'm working on having my own. So, without further ado, I am delighted to bring you this replay of episode 88, False Positivity. It's gonna be a good one. Today's topic: how perfectly perfect it is if you're not doing well, and how important it is to get real with that. In my own healing journey, I've come to recognize how often I used to pretend that everything was okay because it felt so scary to get real about what was not working. It felt safer in my mind and my body. My inner children felt safer when I was telling the story that I was fine. Everything's fine with me. because I didn't want anyone to worry about me, to pay attention to me, because that attention felt so uncomfortable and cringy. To ask me questions I was scared I either couldn't answer, or that if I did start to answer those questions, I would collapse and fall into an emotional pit of despair I feared I could never crawl out of. It honestly felt like the world might end if someone else saw that I wasn't actually okay in a real way. I also recently realized that this child part of me was scared I would get in trouble if I was upset or hurt, if I wasn't okay, that I would be punished or negated or told I was wrong for feeling less than amazing. I was worried I would hear, "Look at all you have. Who are you to be upset? Who are you to complain?" Today we'll be talking about this habit of hiding our ouch, the hazards of false positivity, and not getting real about what's not okay in your life. Coming up soon, we'll be talking about the habit of using complaining as a buffer against our true tenderness, which is not a negation of what I'm about to say. It's just an addendum. But make sure that you're subscribed to the show so you don't miss that one. So my beauty, it may sound something like this in your brain. Something challenging happens, and you immediately move to, everything is fine. I'm totally fine. Things are okay. And the background thought is, who am I? With all of this privilege, I live indoors, I have food to eat, my parents immigrated and worked so hard for me, my mom, maybe the story is your mom quit her job to stay home, or your mom worked 3 jobs to make your life possible, right? Whatever that story is, it boils down to, who am I to be anything less than happy, fine, okay? And I hear this all the time from my clients, this denial of their own upset, because they think it's not for them to be less than happy, or their brains say that if they let themselves feel it all, it will surely overwhelm and kill them. A feeling I know all too well in my own physiology. When I was in college, we often joked about what we called the suffering Olympics. Like there was this hierarchy of ills and suffering that creates this story that if things aren't horrifyingly wrong, like if you're not living in a war zone, then you don't really have a problem. And thus that internal question is spawned, who am I to complain? It was this negation of our own pain because others had it worse. And I want to dive into how harmful that way of thinking can be, especially for those of us socialized as girls and women. We are so often taught to put up with it. We are conditioned to make the best of it. We are often taught to hold our feelings in, not to nag or whine or be needy, not to be a problem or a bother. So too, Black folks, BIPOC folks, queer folks are taught to go along to get along with the sexist comment, the homophobic comment, the subtle put down, the racist microaggression, not to make a fuss, not to be a bother, not to be seen as angry or a problem. I also see this framework so often in my immigrant clients. My parents did so much to come to this country for me. Who am I to complain? And it carries with it, often in the background, often unknown, right, in that subconscious, this survivor's guilt of having gotten out of or been brought as a child out of actually dangerous, actually really scary situations to live in comfort, to live with running water. Who am I to complain? And for those of us with a history of codependent, people-pleasing, and perfectionist thinking, we can be really great at avoiding the challenging feelings, like sadness, disappointment, and anger, because we have this deep fear that if we show others we aren't okay, then they won't be okay. And that is dangerous for us. Because our worldview sounds like, if everyone else isn't okay, I am not okay. So we sugarcoat our pain and try to minimize it when we are the one suffering deep inside. In perfectionist thinking, we hide our success and our hardships because we are so scared of being a failure, and because we fear someone else telling us that we're wrong, criticizing us. So we hide our achievements and our pain. My darling, darling love, just because someone else told you that your pain doesn't matter doesn't mean you have to believe them. Let me say that again. Just because someone else told you that your pain doesn't matter does not mean you have to believe them. Your child self may have believed them, totally, but adult you doesn't have to. You don't have to borrow that thought, believe that thought, live as though that thought is real, because it's just not. Your pain matters because it does, and you get to be honest and real with yourself about it. With the truest, deepest love for you, I will say this. False positivity, pretending everything is okay, is BSing yourself. It's not honest. It's not kind to yourself or anyone else. It hurts you deeply, and it's not conducive to you living with true intention, which we talked about in episode 84. As always, I will say this too. This habit of pretending you're okay, of reaching for the false positivity and trying not to upset anyone else by admitting that you're hurt or upset yourself, is your beautiful, loving brain trying to protect you. It doesn't want you to feel bad, and that's loving and protective. I hope you can hear and see that. Maybe you grew up in a situation where showing challenging emotions was not welcome. Maybe that's the safest thing for your inner child who, let's face it, was stuck with whatever the circumstances were in your family of origin, in your culture, your society, facing whatever systems of oppression you grew up surviving and managing. The safest thing for that little one was to make the best of things and to act like everything was okay, even when it wasn't. So what's the problem here? Isn't it better to act positive than to wallow in negativity? I mean, well, sure, unless you're lying to yourself. So often our brains tell us stories, effectively lies, untruths like, I'm not good enough, who am I to ask for help, I'll never measure up, my business won't succeed, I'm unlovable. Stories that we are not worthy, that keep us from doing what we know and want for ourselves. And eventually, this can lead to an overall sense of apathy about our own lives when we don't feel the internal locus of control to choose our thoughts in the face of the stories our brains have been conditioned to tell. And when we strengthen the story that our pain and hurts don't matter and aren't worth voicing, especially if voicing your ouch in childhood led to negation of your pain, being told not to complain, hearing the old suck it up buttercup or stiff upper lip narrative. If you knew in your brilliance that you wouldn't get heard, validated, cared for, loved, or that you would get punished for complaining, told you have a roof over your head, food on your plate, no reason to complain when others have it so bad. That apathy, that lack of ownership makes sense. And what happens when we play along with this who am I to be complaining narrative in attempting to push our struggles down and away is that we multiply the problem. We make it all so much worse by pretending we aren't hurt because the hurt doesn't go away, and we block ourselves from finding solutions. When you tell yourself it's not okay to own what's going on for you, you cannot work to change it. I say this one all the time, and I will say it again. You can't heal what you can't feel, my darling. In contrast, when you are committed to living with intention, that includes pausing and recognizing the habitual thoughts that keep you out of intentional living. It means telling yourself the truth about what you're feeling, acknowledging the truth of your feels, and having a range of emotions is beautiful and so vital for our wellness. As long as you are pretending everything is okay when it's not, you are not being honest with yourself. And that leads to trying to push the challenging or difficult feelings away through buffering, which we talked about in episode 14. And buffering is the habit of attempting to not feel your feels by doing something, anything, to distract yourself from dealing with it. Like watching TV or drinking or eating or smoking or exercising or gossiping as a way of unintentionally or unconsciously attempting to make the challenging things go away through avoidance. And while I'm never demonizing any behavior, the choice to use those behaviors as a buffer to try to not feel a thing does not serve us in the long run. And when we are buffering, we cannot show up for ourselves and the people we love in the ways we want to. One of the most common ways this fear of owning our pain shows up for my clients, and showed up for me like so big, is in taking on the fixer role, which we talked about in episode 71. If it's not okay for you to acknowledge the hard stuff, you're going to want to fix the pain and struggles and worries of everyone else in your world, to try to take tons of actions to make their pain go away because you're so uncomfortable with your own pain, versus giving the people you love space to feel all of their feels, including feeling really shitty. Because feeling like crap is a normal, natural, and important part of being a human. It's so important to acknowledge the pain, my love, in ourselves and others, instead of attempting to push it down and away, instead of negating in others what was negated in you. My beauty, we all need room to have a bad day or a bad week or year. I'm looking at you, 2020. We need that room to acknowledge when things are not working for us. False positivity blocks us from living a real life with human authenticity and can keep us in lousy situations because we tell ourselves, well, it's not really that lousy. Who am I to complain? I worked with a client who stayed in a 12-year relationship with someone who was chronically depressed and wasn't taking care of themselves, who wasn't showing up for my client or their relationship. And she stayed because she told herself it was fine enough and that it would change, right? If she just stuck around and worked harder, it would change. And that it was okay if her partner couldn't offer her the care or attention she wanted and needed, the interdependence, the reciprocity, the mutuality. But all of those things never came. You see, false positivity, putting lipstick on the old internal pig, often brings with it false hope. A story that if you suffer long enough, things will change. And I see this so often. To be clear, my beauty, I'm in no way dissing anyone with chronic depression. I've totally been there myself. The point here is that in this example, the relationship was so not working for my client. She loved to go out. She loved to be in nature, to hike, to socialize, to have friends over. And her partner wanted none of that. And so she got none of that. In her attempts to fix her partner, fix the chronic depression, by going along with what her partner wanted, though it wasn't what she needed. In short, she was unconsciously, like I'm not saying she did this on purpose, right? But she was lying to herself to attempt to ward off challenging, negative feelings. And I'm saying negative while making little air quotes because I don't believe that any feelings are negative, but stay with me. So instead of facing the challenging feelings, she spent 12 years in an unfulfilling relationship until she got coaching and could finally see what was really going on. My sweet, beautiful, tender little ravioli of a human. I get it. We think we are bad for having negative thoughts and feelings. Someone taught you to think that way. You were socialized, potentially, I know I was, to think positive. And we see it all over social media as this positive vibes only culture that I find so problematic. Once again, yes to positive energy and thoughts and feelings, but only in the context of reality and not emotional bypassing. Not in pretending things are all sunshine and rainbows when they really just are not all the time, because life isn't meant to be 100% positive at all times. A client of mine who is undergoing cancer treatment told me she feels this constant pressure to be upbeat and positive and to have an "I'm going to beat this cancer" attitude, even when she mostly feels tired and worn down by the treatment and its side effects and scared about the uncertainty of her health and the effect of this push to feel really positive and have this upbeat attitude. For her is to lead her to feel like a bad cancer patient. And those are her words, right? It makes me feel like a bad cancer patient. And like if she acknowledges the terribleness and doesn't get better, then somehow it's all her fault for not being positive enough. And that framework just sucks on so many levels. And we don't let ourselves feel the anger or other negative emotions. Those energies get trapped in your body. My nerds, when we are holding the anger, the disappointment, the hurt, the sorrow, the sadness at bay and not processing it through our bodies, not letting it out, we armor our human bodies against the pain, braced for the blow like a boxer in the ring, building up tension in our fascia, our muscles, leading to headaches, neck aches, jaw pain, belly aches, so much discomfort and stress. If the story in our mind is that everything has to be perfect or everything is completely effed, then we start to train our physiology to brace against something being bad because it's not okay for it to be bad, the story goes. Knowing we have no outlet because who am I to complain, we hold it all in where it festers and effectively poisons us. We live a life where we're always on alert and waiting for the other shoe to drop, because we have learned to expect something bad to happen and that we won't let ourselves process that emotion through our bodies. We have come to correlate on this physiologic level something challenging, an internal pain of holding it in. But if you accept that lousy and terrible things happen, that they are just as much a part of life as beauty, then you actually don't have to fear any shoe dropping. You can begin to allow yourself to step into deep acceptance, which is, as always, so different from condoning whatever injustice or pain or bad thing is happening. It's simply accepting that that thing is real and happening so you can see where your own locus of control is. And it's often in your own mind. There is a reason that so many of us with codependent histories and ways of thinking have physical manifestations of our mental state. You can tell yourself, I hate my job, and I'm so lucky to have it. But you can only do that for so long before the tension builds up in your body and you end up collapsed, overwhelmed, exhausted. In my many years in primary care and functional medicine, I saw this time after time. Adrenal and digestive concerns from the chronic hypervigilance and thus chronic elevated cortisol of fighting against the realities of life. I know my own irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, small intestine bacterial overgrowth, SIBO, were worsened by stress because science, and by pretending everything is glorious or even just fine, thank you, when you're so often really suffering, is a massive systemic biological stressor. Your mind, body, and spirit are not separate things, my love. You are one glorious animal with a mind, body, spirit that is in constant internal conversation, and trying to separate them out doesn't serve you. Just like disavowing your need to see what there is to complain about also does not serve you. And false positivity doesn't just take a toll on your mind, body. It impacts the depth of your joy. If you do not allow yourself to feel the challenging things, you can't see or feel the real positivity in life. It's okay for things to feel terrible. That's real. That's human. That's important. You're going to have some lousy days. And you need to learn how to create space for those feelings for yourself and for others. To release your totally understandable desire to want to rush in, to buffer or fix or change things for yourself or others on the emotional plane. And note that, as always, I'm not talking about wanting to change political realities. Please rush in and change those, and I'll be right beside you at the protest. Right now, we're talking about wanting to change feelings instead of feeling them. What I want most for you and for me is a radical honesty and authenticity. The willingness to really acknowledge what you feel, to see how things really are, to let yourself know what you actually want, and to know that you deserve those things. False positivity keeps us from looking at our habitual thoughts and then circumstances in our life that may not serve us because they're all sugar-coated and shiny. I know. Don't I know that looking at your own habitual thoughts is challenging and hard. I do it every day. But it's among the most important work you can do to move towards living the life you actually want. And that means letting go of false positivity and learning to see things exactly as they are, with clear eyes. Pausing to accept how things are and how you really feel about them. Only then are you in a position to truly decide what you want to do about it all. If you want to keep those feelings or shift them using thought work. My sweetness, what's the worst thing that happens when you let go of false positivity? Well, you might feel really shitty, really angry, really sad, a host of other feelings. And my darling, that's okay. Because when you let go of false positivity, you also get to face the truth of things as they really are. Or you can choose to continue to push it away. You have a choice. You can face the realities, or you can face the consequences of continuing to push reality away. And by buffering or emotionally bypassing, trying to pretend that the challenging things aren't challenging, you're effectively just kicking the can down the road and delaying or compounding the eventual negativity. My sweetness, it just doesn't work. You get to decide if you want to live a radically honest life. It's hard and it's painful and it sucks, but I will choose it every single day after a lifetime of not choosing it, working to avoid seeing what was challenging, living in that framework of who am I to complain, and trying to slap some BS false positivity on my pain. Because when you block the bad, you also block the good. There is no shadow without light, but there is also no light without shadow. And I'll invite you, my beautiful love, to let the light in. Thank you for listening, my love. I hope this episode was supportive. And as always, if you are enjoying the show, make sure that you subscribe or follow. And I'd be really grateful if you left a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever it is that you get your shows. And while you're listening, grab a little screenshot, share it on social media, tag me. It is so delightful to connect with you all. And when you rate, review, and share the show, you help to get this free resource into more and more ears. And that, after all, is my goal, to be of service as far and wide as this little gal can. All right, my darlings, have a beautiful rest of your day, a gorgeous week, and I'll talk to you soon. If you've been enjoying the show and learning a ton, it's time to apply it with my expert guidance so you can live life with intention without the anxiety, overwhelm, and resentment, so you can get unstuck. You're not going to want to miss the opportunity to join my exclusive intimate group coaching program. So head on over to victoriaalbina.com/masterclass to grab your seat now. See you there. It's going to be a good one.